Hi guys, welcome to the last pilot episode of the Tarim Talks with your host Zulfukar. Today we have Dr. Daniel Chanisheff, a general practitioner in Sydney, Australia. We find out his biggest influences, mentors, and the profound moments that changed his life. He shares his most important advice for those wanting to succeed within the medical field. Find out how this straight D student became a successful doctor with his own GP practice. Now, enjoy.
Awesome. Let's go for it.
Right, so actually, if you could just give me a intro about your industry you're in and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so I'm a general practitioner, or for people in America, it's a family medicine doctor. So I work in the health industry. I studied medicine and I did my specialty in general practice training in Australia. So I work at the moment in my own clinic as a general practitioner, seeing all kinds of patients, but I subspecialize in a couple of extra areas, one of which is cosmetic medicine. But I also do some things that might not seem so straightforward, like I do a lot of sexual health, mental health, but, everything from cradle to the grave. So that's the kind of job I do right now.
Right, that's really interesting. Since you've seen quite a lot in your profession, is there something that totally changed the way you looked at something?
Yes. There was... So some of the most profound lessons that I got was from individual mentors or individual patients. There's been a couple of experiences that make you sit there and really think about yourself, what you're doing. Does it mean anything? Does it have to mean anything? How do I be better as a person, or how do I just enjoy my life more? And then, you're very human and you forget these things after time, but you get reminded every now and again and you sort of stay on track.
Is there anything that you can talk about?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So there's a couple of examples where I'm not going to break confidentiality, I suppose. When I was a third-year doctor, so I had finished my internship and my resident year, I was doing some casual work. So I was moving from hospital to hospital wherever people needed me, just to see what I liked. And I ended up in a field called palliative care, which is the care of people who are dying. So people that are going to die, and you're not trying to cure them, so you're trying to make them as comfortable as possible before they pass away. And when I was on this rotation, 99% of the people are old. They're 80 plus. They've got diseases of old age. And that's pretty much to expect it. It's sad when they pass, but it's okay. But one day, I think I was 27 or 26 at the time. One day, this girl came in and she was my age. She was 26. And she came in and her whole family had come in. Her husband, her parents, her brothers and sisters, her cousins, everyone came in with her. And then I realized that I knew this person. She was someone I caught the bus with all the time during uni and even during high school. She went to a different high school, but we caught the bus every day together. And, we had this sort of moment where you go, oh my God, you used to catch this bus with me. And we had a bit of a chat. And then I found out about her condition. She had ovarian cancer. Pretty horrendous disease, but it's always diagnosed too late. You only find out when it's too late, right? You often find out when you can't do anything about it. So she had this, and it had blocked her kidneys. So the cancer had grown where her kidneys weren't draining. And she had come in for this problem. And we had the chat about, what would you like to do about this? Would you like us to put a stent in the kidney so we can open it back up and everything will be okay? You'll get to walk out of here tomorrow and continue doing what you're doing. And she goes, well, if that happens, how am I going to die? And I said, well, I don't know. It depends on where the cancer spreads to. She goes, well, what if it spreads to my brain? I said, oh, well, you could get seizures, you could get headaches, and eventually you might become confused and you'll succumb. He goes, well, what if it spreads to my lungs? And I said, oh, you might get chest pain, you might become short of breath, where it's quite just distressing. And, you'll succumb that way. So she went through all these different organs and, what's going to happen if it spreads here? What's going to happen if it spreads there? And then she said, what if I do nothing? Like, what if I leave my kidneys alone? I said, look, your kidneys are going to build up some toxins in the body. You're going to become very drowsy. Pretty much within about 36 hours. You'll be pretty drowsy. You'll be comatose and you'll pass away. And she just looked at me. She goes, I don't want to do anything. Leave me alone. I don't want to, don't touch anything. That's it. This is the way I'm going to die. So at that moment, she decided that pretty much in 48 hours, she'll be dead. And she had got married the year before, and she didn't know that she had a condition the year before. She just moved to London. So she just came back after she found out about this diagnosis. So her family were visibly very upset, but no one challenged her. She had made this decision. And yeah, two days later, she had passed away. And it just made me realize it was very close to home. This is a person that lived in my neighborhood. We caught the same bus every day. We went to uni, the same uni every single day. And here we are. I'm sitting there deciding what kind of career I want to do and what I want to do for the rest of my life. And she's deciding she's going to die in 48 hours. And just made me realize how important even the smallest decisions are. She didn't waste time. Every moment she had there was valuable. She was with the people she loved the most. And she made a very conscious decision not to prolong her suffering, but not to pick a way that was undignified to her. All the other methods of dying for her were pretty undignified. She'd either become confused or, make everyone else around her anxious, and this seemed like the way to go. And I was just very impressed. I was very sad. I was incredibly sad, and everyone on the unit was very sad, but I was actually very impressed at her maturity and be able to decide that decision for herself, that this is it. And I think if someone told me I'll be dead in 48 hours, I don't know how I'd act out. Yeah, so that was a very life-changing moment for me. I think at that time I decided I was going to knuckle down and stop messing around and pick a career. And in fact, I picked the wrong career. At that time, I picked emergency medicine. So I changed my mind a couple of years later, but still, it was good. I don't regret it.
No, you shouldn't. It's a pretty big lesson.
Yeah, that one's a big one. I don't think everyone gets to go through that. You can go through your whole medical career and not face that, I suppose. Or you could go through it and not get a lesson out of it too. People compartmentalize in different ways, but I was very fortunate that I had that connection with this person in particular. I got a big story out of it. I changed my life, really, in that moment.
Yeah, experiences like that can totally shake your world. But I want to start from the beginning. So can you tell me a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, so I was born in Adelaide. My parents moved to Adelaide in 1979. I was born in 1985. So I grew up pretty much like a lot of Australian kids did, which is being a first generation, or if you want to look at a second generation immigrant child, where there's other immigrant children around you, but by and large, a lot of kids are Aussie, Caucasian, Australian. Parents trace back to the First Fleet kind of thing. And growing up, that wasn't a problem. And in high school, I think people start to form their tribes and people align themselves with people who are similar to them. So you find that the ethnic kids mix with the other ethnic kids and the Aussie kids stick with the Aussie kids. And that was interesting being an Uyghur because there were no other kids like me at my school. I didn't know where I belonged. I couldn't tell if I was ethnic like the other Italian and Greek kids that went to my school. Or I couldn't tell if I was Asian like the Chinese kids that went to my school. But luckily it was a very inclusive school, so things went well as well. Both my parents live in Adelaide. They worked really hard. They gave me every opportunity. They did expect me to do well, but not in a way that was like ever put pressure on me. I never felt that demand or that pressure to do this or do that. I think no matter what I ended up doing, they would have been extremely happy. Having grown up in that part of the world during the Cultural Revolution, I think they were just glad to be in a place where there's really no problems at all.
Right. Would you say your parents were your biggest influences, or is there someone else that you could kind of name?
No, definitely my parents were my biggest influences. I think that's a given, you spend the vast majority of your developmental years learning what your parents teach you, but also what they don't teach you and what they say and do. And by watching my dad work diligently and not take sick days and work really hard, the lesson might have taken a very long time for me to learn, but over time I realized that that's a fantastic value to have. Laziness in work ethic isn't really a thing. I think working hard is definitely an important thing to do. And same with my mum. Worked incredibly hard until she couldn't work anymore, essentially. And I learned a lot of my values from there, how to be a good person, how to treat other people with respect, how to have an open mind and see other people's points of view, how to talk without getting angry, all these fantastic lessons. I can't really think of anyone else other than my parents and my sisters that I learnt this from. Sure, there were very specific lessons that I learnt from mentors, but I think 99% of my values in life came from my family.
Right. Can you speak a bit more about your mentors?
Yeah. So I've had a few mentors along the way. In primary school, when I didn't, she's a mentor in retrospect. So I didn't realize in primary school that this teacher was a mentor, really. But she was my German teacher. But she'd say really positive things, But when I finished primary school and I moved to high school, she had found me to see how I was doing and kept motivating me. And every time some good result would be published somewhere, like in a newspaper where you get a certificate in something, she would contact me. So from a very young age, there was a lot of positive reinforcement. That was my German teacher, Fraulein Schmidt. And then when I was in high school, in that age where you start to act out a little bit, I had another teacher, my home group teacher, Miss Adami, and she would actually pull me in and say, "Look, Daniel, this isn't you. This is not what you like. You know you can do better than this," and almost shame me back into sort of focusing on my studies and making sure I don't neglect it to look cool. And she contacted me even after I moved high schools. She contacted me to let me know that she was very proud and she'd been keeping an eye on things. And it's nice to hear that from someone who's not got skin in the game. My parents, they're invested in me. I'm the child. They're going to tell me they're proud of me and they're going to tell me to do well. But this is someone who took their own initiative to tell me that from a young age. So I was quite, I think, taken aback that, other people weren't getting this attention, and she saw something that needed addressing, and it made me focus a bit more. In medical school, there's a lot of people I learned from, but there was one guy in particular, and he helped me make my decision to go into general practice. And he's a cardiologist. His name is Hassan Tyub. If he ever listens to this podcast, I'd like him to hear that I'm very happy to have met him, and he helped change my direction in life. At one stage, I wanted to drop out of medicine, not of study, but after I'd been working for a few years and I was trying to find a career to go to, I was really getting a bit despondent about not being happy in my job. And he reached out to me. He was a few years above me. He had looked after members of my family even. Adelaide's a very small community, so every doctor's looked after everyone's family. But he reached out and he said, "Look, I heard you're thinking about changing careers. Tell me more about it." And we talked for a little while. And at that stage, I wanted to become a management consultant. And I'd come to Sydney to sit some interviews. And he put me in touch with friends who had done management consulting and had done MBAs at some of the biggest unis around the world, INSEAD and Harvard and all these places. So look, talk to these guys, maybe they'll give you some ideas. So he put me in that direction. And after a couple of weeks, he called me back to see how I was doing. And this guy had done cardiology. So he was a very smart, hardworking guy. He's from a Syrian background and he'd moved to Australia. And then he wasn't content. And after he finished cardiology, he did intensive care. So he was a double specialist, or he was going to become a double specialist before he realized that life's not all about this. And he started to have this epiphany himself and picked what was important for him and his children and his family. He wanted to put them first before work and his own accomplishments. So he had this chat with me about, picking the things that are going to give me the best life satisfaction, something that's going to give me time to be able to spend with the people I care about, to be able to do things in my spare time, as well as have a medical specialty. So he advised me to do general practice, mainly because it's a shorter specialty and it would give me a lot of free time. And then I could go and do whatever I wanted. I could do management consulting and I could come back to it. But yeah, because of his chat out of the blue, where he didn't have to, he wasn't my teacher, he wasn't my supervisor, he was in a different city to me. He took the time to do that. I really took it to heart. And I did change and I applied for general practice and I moved to Sydney, and the rest is history.
So how did that relationship start?
It was very, very odd. I was just walking in the hallway and I bumped into him once at the hospital. And he told me off for, walking too fast. So I said sorry. Then he saw my name tag. It's a very unique surname, I guess, Chanisheff. And he goes, "Oh, are you related to this Chanisheff?" And I said, "Yeah, that's my dad." And my dad used to work at the hospital as well. And he goes, "Oh, okay. And are you related to that Chanisheff?" "Oh, yes, my uncle." He's one of my patients. "Are you related to this Chanisheff?" And he just went on and on. And I realized that he'd seen a lot of members of my family at some stage as a cardiologist. So we just started talking and, "What's your background?" I said, "I'm Uyghur," but my dad's father, my grandpa's side is Tatar. And he knew all about these cultures. So we just started chatting, went out to lunch. And that was, one of the stages where I was interested in cardiology as well. So he would take me and watch advanced procedures and him doing procedures and take me to different parts of the labs that most younger doctors don't get to go to. So just by showing a keen interest and being very personable, I guess he took me under his wing a little bit. But then we became quite good friends after I graduated. Caught up overseas in some places. Every time he's in Sydney, we try to catch up.
Yeah, that's an amazing kind of natural mentor to get. I think a lot of young people, especially who are ambitious, I think are looking for people that they can connect with naturally, but it's sometimes difficult to find that person who's, open to that and also doing very well.
Yeah, it is difficult. You're right. It is difficult to find a mentor. It's also difficult to have an engaged mentee. I've been part of a lot of mentorship programs through medicine where I put my name forward as a mentor and people get assigned to you and they match with you and they just drop off the face of the earth. And I'm sure it's because they've got busy things in their lives, that takes the last place when you're trying to finish your internship and you're trying to get your applications in. Having a chat to an older doctor on occasion doesn't seem like a important thing at that time. But I think this kind of mentorship relationship really does matter when things get hard and you don't know who to talk to and you have some life decisions to make. And I think finding a good mentor is really important. And when it comes naturally, it's fantastic. It's so organic.
So talk about that. Actually, I was going to ask about whether you'd mentored before, but it seems like you've put yourself forward quite a lot.
Yeah, I've been mentoring since, if you include tutoring as mentoring, since year 12. I started a program at the University of Adelaide called Peer-to-Peer Program, where, to be honest, it was out of self-interest. I wanted to revise content before my first barrier exam in third year, and you have to revise content all the way from the last 3 years. And I realized that the best way to answer a question is to be able to explain it to someone else. So I thought it would be handy for the third years to tutor the first year students, maybe once a week or once a fortnight on whatever topic they're studying at the time. So I started out with a little group. I invited a couple of first years along, and that group started from 5, and I think it became 40 people at one stage. So a third, of the classroom was coming to my tute group. That was getting too much for me. And eventually I approached the university and said, look, I think this is a fantastic idea. If you want to engage, we want to get everybody on board. But yeah, I started that peer-to-peer program in med school. Every stage of the way, you've got medical students underneath you, whether you want them or not. And I've got medical students that come as well and sit in with you and you teach them how to do things. And I find it really useful because you remember that if you can explain it to them, you can make their life easier and you can maybe even influence someone to choose general practice as a career. But it means that you're on top of it still. You remember all these things, basic concepts, first principles. So yeah.
Okay. And it's quite nice because it kind of flows into the next question, which is your top 3 advice for those people wanting to succeed in your field.
I would say in medicine in particular, you kind of really got to know you want to do it at the beginning. Medicine is, as an undergraduate degree, it's twice as long as most other undergraduate degrees. So, you're going to start making money later in life. So I would say don't go in there with a romanticized idea of what being a doctor is. Talk to doctors. Talk to your own general practitioner. Talk to anyone who's a doctor. Talk to me. And I'll tell you what the experience is like without over fantasizing it or without making it sound like the worst thing in the world either. So number 1, be confident that's what you want to do. Number 2 is if you learn time management skills, probably starting in year 12, I think things are much more manageable than they seem. Everything that seemed really hard, when you look back on it, is really easy because you got through it, right? And that's the mentality you need to have for every single step of the way. So if you are humble and you time manage and you ask for help. The one thing I saw in high school a lot was that people never really made use of one of the greatest resources there, which is the teachers. And if you show initiative, they'll give you everything. I was a straight D student in year 11. Literally, like no one expected me to finish year 12. And that year something clicked because I went to a bad school, and at that school, some of my friends went to juvenile detention. Some of my friends dropped out of school. Some of them joined gangs, and some of them just said, look, I'm going to go work. And they started working in jobs that were, you can get as a 16-year-old. And they're still in those jobs today, which is great for them. But it wasn't for me. So I decided that that's not going to be me. I'm going to do something else. And I moved schools just to get myself out of that environment. And I decided, you know what? I don't have to play soccer at lunch. I can play soccer on the weekends. I'm going to study during lunch. And I was lucky that my school had a lot of people with that kind of mentality. And time management became super easy. I was getting projects done way before they were due. I was going ahead in chapters and it didn't seem like hard work. So when time came for actual deadlines, they were a breeze. That's my very long-winded second piece of advice. And my third piece of advice would be, as best as you can, surround yourself with people who will benefit you. Not in a selfish way, not like, oh, that guy's rich, so he's going to give me money. But like, you know what, that guy's smart and he studies at lunchtime. I want to be more like him. I'm going to hang around with that guy a little bit more. So I keep saying fortunate because I think that nothing happens in life because of someone's pure hard work. I think we're helped every step of the way, right? I was lucky that one of the first friends I made in my new high school was a studious guy. He was very competitive and he ended up becoming a lawyer and, commerce and law and did very well. But I had no idea about economics. And because I sat next to him, I came second in the class, second to him. Because we competed all year. I wanted to beat this guy. It was a game. I gamified it. It was really fun to try beat him in exams. But he, I say to him every time I see him, man, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. You changed my life. Actually, I'll throw him back into my influential people list. His name's Viet. Fantastic guy.
It's great advice. So let's look into the future. So what does success look like to you?
Success is when I don't have to give up the things I want to do, but also enjoy the things I have to do. And I can continue to achieve more goals.
And can you talk about some of those goals? Do you have them in mind? Or?
Yeah, I want to grow my business, right? The reason I started my own general practice clinic is because I wanted to do things my way. I thought that things could be better. So, a couple of years ago, I set out with a couple of friends and we opened up a clinic and it's about to turn 3. So I'd like to replicate that. I'd like to go back to Adelaide and do it. I'd like to do it in other cities as well. So that's one of my more business goals. From a family point of view, I'd like to spend more time with my family. They live in a different city now. My parents live in Adelaide and it's a 1.5 to 2 hour flight. I want to create enough success in my work that I can afford to take that time off and spend with my family, with my nephews and nieces, with my sisters, and make sure that relationship is stronger.
Okay. What's been the hardest thing about starting your own business?
You go in preparing as much as you can mentally. This is what my spend is going to be. This is how much I'm expecting to spend on wages. But you have to be really a lot of different people in a small business. I'm no longer just a GP. I don't go to work and I do my GP work. In that same day, I'm a boss. I have to talk with my practice manager and staff about complaints. And at the same time, you have to be an entrepreneur. You always have to think of ideas of how do we let people know we're here. We offer a great service, but how do people know we're here? How do people know we're a great service? So you think about advertising and entrepreneurship. And so you're putting on all these different hats. And I don't think I was ever trained for that because medical school, it's literally about being a safe doctor. How not to kill people and how to keep people going longer. And then you specialize to be even better than that. But nowhere do they teach you any business skills. So that was a very steep learning curve for me. And I'm still learning about the finances. Very lucky, once again, that my business partner is a former auditor for the government and a commerce major. So that does take care of a lot of it, but I still want to know for myself.
So what made you start your own clinic?
So being able to control the way I work was very important. And I think that was the biggest thing. And so I believed that if you could create an environment where GPs are allowed to practice excellent medicine, really spend the time and put their skills to use, and you charge for it properly, people will come. Not all people want free medicine. And that was a risk. Having a private general practice clinic was not a done thing, especially My clinic's pretty much near the CBD. Like, this place is super saturated with free clinics. There's like 4 free clinics within walking distance of my clinic. And everyone's like, why are you doing this? This is ridiculous. And yet we're the fastest growing clinic, and it's meant to be the quietest season of the year. So I think it paid off. If you're really convinced in something, you just got to do it. What's the worst that's going to happen? You pour and you start again.
Yeah. So what is it that puts your clinic above the others? Is it just the quality service, or?
We've been lucky to get a great team. So holding our team to really high standards, attracting and only hiring people that you think are going to fit the team and work well together. Picking people that are really diverse and different to me. And you let them work with some autonomy. They can make their own decisions, of course, you know, what's right for the patient. But you set some standards. You say, look, it's unacceptable to miss these things. And people just keep coming back. You know, you have to be a good doctor, but there's plenty of good doctors in Australia. But I think that communication skill is the biggest and most important thing. Makes people feel listened to. It makes people feel appreciated when they've come to you. They don't get dismissed. And that's hard to pick people that you think are going to fit that team. And then the flip side to that is if you manage to pick a bad team member, as difficult as it is, you got to let them go real quickly. You can't have that poison in your team.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to ask some quick fire questions. So these can be answered shorter if you like. What's one lesson you would teach your kids?
I don't have kids, so I'm grossly underqualified to answer this question. I think compassion is the number one thing I'd like to teach my kids. How to listen to people and see other people's points of view. You can use that for good, you can use that for bad, doesn't matter. Just really understand other people's points of view. And then you'll be able to make your point much clearer, whatever it is.
Okay. And is there something outside of your current, profession and your business that you're passionate about?
Oh, that's a tough one, man. Oh, man. Oh, you know what? I absolutely love. I'm a huge photography nerd.
Yes.
Yeah, a real hobby. There we go. So I photograph using film. So I take photos on film cameras still.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm a real nerd. Yeah. I don't shoot much photos here in Sydney because it's also normal to me. But when I go overseas, I take this monster of a camera. It's called a Pentax 6.7. It weighs like 3 kilos. Each roll of film only takes 10 shots. So, I think I was in Istanbul a couple months ago and I took 5 rolls of film, 50 photos in my week there, which is nothing compared to someone who would take a digital camera, right?
Yeah.
And then I develop the photos and I slowly upload them one every couple months. So I'm still got a backlog of 4 years of photos I haven't seen, which is really fun because you get to take the photos and sort of relive the trips again and again down the track.
What made you get into that? Seems like quite peculiar but interesting.
Yeah, it's an odd hobby, isn't it? Yeah. When I was in year 10, I picked the easiest subject I thought was the easiest subject in the world, which was photography at school. It was the first subject I ever failed. So I actually failed it, right? Because I messed around with the film too much. I think for my film project, I only had 1 photo that turned out. So you'd think that I'd give up after that. But then I found my dad's camera, and he had this Canon AE1 that he bought in Hong Kong. So when he left Urumqi, they had to live in Hong Kong for about a year while they were waiting for their papers to come to Australia. And one of the first luxury items he ever bought was this camera. And he kept it in perfect mint condition all these years. And all our family photos are taken on this camera. And then, smaller pocket cameras came out and that kind of thing. And one day I found it and I just started playing with it. And the photos were beautiful. And there was something just really soulful about it. The photos have got character. Each different film's got a story to tell. You can only take 36 shots on that kind of camera. And you sort of, it's beautiful. That's what got me into it. The fact that my dad took a lot of photos, I guess. It was something we shared almost,
That is cool. One more. What's the best way for people to contact you?
Me, I think the easiest way for people to contact me would be through Facebook, to be honest. As bad as social media can be, I'm on Facebook all the time. So through Facebook Messenger, just look for my name, Daniel Chanisheff. I might not see it straight away, but I'll eventually check those unread messages and get back to people.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on here and talking about your journey and all the lessons you've learned and the advice you've given. So
not at all. Hopefully it's useful.
Yeah, no, very.
Awesome, man. It's very nice to meet you, Zaf. Thanks for chatting.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us and listening to the Tarim Talks podcast, brought to you by the Tarim Network.